Okay, I hope everyone had a good week, and those who didn't attend last week, you can still watch the first class on our YouTube channel or on the emails. If you're not on the emails that I send out specific for the class, you can email us and we will give you updates. Today I don't have a handout. There will be certain handouts that will come in the email with the recording. As I said last week, let me first start with the blessing. As with the blessing we learned last week on water, on anything. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol niya bidvaro. My mother taught me never to drink from a bottle. She's not here today. See, I think it's time for a little joke to lighten up the mood. So there was a rabbi and a priest and a pastor getting together for lunch, and the topic of the conversation is, what do they want their congregants to speak about them at their funeral? As you're going to lay there in the chapel, and what do you want the congregants to talk about you? And the priest says, I would like my flock to tell me, to speak about the great teacher and the great spiritual leader I was. And the pastor says, I would like them, as I'm laying there in the coffin, to speak about my kindness and my activities, how I built the church and all that. And how about you, Rabbi? And the rabbi says, I would like the people standing at my funeral when the coffin is right there to say, hey, look, he's moving.
Very good.
So today's topic, as last week, this topic was life, birth, the process of the soul, how the soul gets born into a body, the merging of body and soul, and the development of the soul through different life cycles of birth, circumcision, baby naming, bat mitzvah, wedding. So we are at the stage of retirement. What we're going to talk today is a little bit aging. How do we deal with illness? And then we're going to get to some practical topics, difficult topics, but we'll try to talk them, which is end-of-life issues, medical decisions, organ donations, living wills, prayers, etc. So we find aging, first time aging in the Torah, with our patriarchs and matriarchs. It says Abraham became old in his age. Avraham zakim baba yamim. And it's interesting is that the Medrash says that until Abraham, people did not really age or became weaker before they died. They kind of died in an instant. There was no kind of no warning, so to speak. Matter of fact, there's the concept that when somebody sneezes, right? What do we say? Gesundheit in Yiddish, right? Or bless you. Gesundheit means you should be healthy. Why is it that when you sneeze, you say bless you or Gesundheit? Why not when you cough? What's the sneezing concept? So we learned last week that in Genesis, when God created Adam, God blew a living soul in the nostrils of Adam. The word soul actually in Hebrew is neshama, which means a breath. Every breath we take is life. The way a person dies or died back then was by sneezing. They sneezed and their soul departed. So it's the last breath, so to speak. So when we sneeze, we say Gesundheit just to give a blessing. You should be strong and healthy. But back then you would have died. Now we're still living on. Interestingly, is that our forefathers kind of ask for the idea to get some type of warning before we die, for the sole reason that they can be closure, that there can be preparation, and mainly Jacob. We know that Jacob, before he died, he called in his children and his grandchildren, and he gave them direction. He gave them blessings. Each tribe, each of the 12 children, another special blessing. So, but the Jacob and Abraham kind of asked God, and God changed that there is a concept of aging, of becoming sick, for one purpose, not the only purpose. Obviously, we don't understand the ways of Hashem, but there is the advantage of looking at life with a perspective that there is our mortality. So that gives us some type of proper perspective. However, quickly about retirement, right? I remember one of the videos, the many videos that are out there recorded of the Rebbe. The Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson of blessed memory, who was my personal mentor, the leader behind the whole Chabad movement, who was brilliant and sought after, and people still reading about his wisdom, Jews and non-Jews alike. There's a great book called Rebbe by Rabbi Telushkin, who is one of the most famous Jewish writers. He did a biography on the Rebbe. Highly recommend you read the book, Rebbe. And the video I saw, I had the blessing actually meeting the Rebbe when I was a child, right before my bar mitzvah in New York, and some of you might have met him. The Rebbe would many times do public gatherings where he would share Torah thoughts, and most of them were during Shabbat, where there was no Zoom, no videos, but many of them were during the week as well. Matter of fact, those Farbrengens that were called were broadcasted on satellite. Many stories. You can Google and see many videos. One of the famous videos when he turned 70 in 1972, and he kind of started so that in America, when you turn 70, you kind of slow down in life. You retire, and he says, but in as a Jew, we never retire really from not as a Jew. It says by the very definition that we are alive and that we are on this earth. It says, Adam le'amal yolad, a man was created to toil. We got to be productive. It doesn't mean you have to work in the workforce, but never to. It goes against human nature to slow down, to stop being productive. It's like an engine. If you don't use the engine, it gets rusty. Obviously, you need to have your health. But even if you retire from your workforce, you should be busy with something that is productive, that is beneficial. So we live in the capital of retirement, right? State of Florida, and our community is 80% retirement. So I always encourage people to look at this time, to utilize your time in the most productive way. And one of the blessings is that you have more time is to study, adult education, to study Torah, study wisdom. Go out there and volunteer. Utilize the gifts that Hashem has given you, the talents that you have, to make this community and make the world a better place. I met a lady on yesterday. Was fascinating. She told me how she's involved in a whole project in Israel from here. She's sitting here in Northport, and she's working on a big project in Israel remotely, but she's using her extra time and expertise to do that. And that's so beautiful. And you don't need much. You don't need to be a billionaire to make a difference. You can pick up a phone, you can go on Zoom and mentor somebody and that thing. So that's kind of the blessing of retirement, the time when you are no longer bogged down by the chaos of life, but to do what you want to do in a productive way. So that's kind of my l'chaim and blessing that everyone here should enjoy their retirement and in good health. Let's talk about health and illness in Judaism. So and actually in this week's Torah portion, there's a line that Hashem says to the Jewish people as he's taking them out of Egypt, out of enslavement. Hashem uses the line, Ani Hashem Reifecha, I am God, your healer. And we know the ultimate healer is Hashem. However, the question is if something happens to me, if I'm ill or I get sick, am I supposed to seek medical attention? Or maybe, God runs the world. If God runs the world and God may be sick, okay, so it's anti-God to seek out medical treatment. There are some extremist religious in other religion that they believe they're anti-treatments. And matter of fact, the Talmud says a story of the great sages walking in the roads of Jerusalem, and they walk by a person, and the person turns to the rabbis and says, "Rabbis, please, I am sick. What am I supposed to do?" And the rabbis gave them medical advice: take this herb, do this type of treatment, this type of kind of a medicine to put together. And then the guy says, "But it is God who made me sick. Why are you intervening in giving me medical advice? Your job is to speak to God. Speak to God. Bless me." So they said to him, "What is your occupation?" He said, "I'm a farmer." He says, "Okay, so you have a farm, you have land. Do you just, who created the land?" He said, "God created the land." "Okay, so do you just sit on the land and let God deal with with planting and growing?" He says, "No, in order for grow, I need to plow, I need to put the seeds in, I need to water it, I need to cut it." So he says it's exactly the same thing. God created our bodies, gave it to us. As we spoke last week, our bodies don't belong to us, but he gave us also the means that we have to take care of it. If the body gets weak and gets sick, we have an obligation to do treatment, to take care of it. Because we spoke last week so much, we are partners in creation, right? 6 days, it says on 6 days you should work, on the Sabbath you should rest. So some people say, God is in charge, right? God will provide everything. Well, God says, as much as you have to rest on Shabbos, you also have to go work on 6 days of the week. So we have an obligation to seek medical treatment. When I say obligation, I want to digress for a moment. One of the differences between secular values, or the way in the secular world we look at life, and the way Judaism looks at life, is very much tied in when it comes to medical decisions. Most times, secular law is what the objective is to find out. Before I go to the objective, in general, it's all about my rights. What is my rights, right? We have in America, right? We have our liberty, we have our freedom, we have our rights. In Judaism, the question is not what is my rights, but the question is what is my obligation? What is my obligation? Life doesn't belong to me. A classic difference is if you walk on the beach, for example, and somebody's drowning. You see somebody's drowning, a stranger. Do you have an obligation to go save them? You have an obligation to save them. So in civil law, in American law, you don't have an obligation. In other words, if you just let the person drown, and I'm not talking if there's risk, there's no risk. You're a good swimmer, but there's so many words you can give that person, right? The person who just doesn't care and let the person drown, you're not liable for that person's life that died. Not so in Judaism. Judaism, you have an obligation to save somebody's life. Do not stand idle on the blood of your fellow man. So if you have the ability to jump in the water and save them and you didn't do, you are actually considered a murder as bad. Because again, it's not about my rights, but what's my obligation. And same thing is about my own life. I don't own my own life. God has granted me life, and God has given me a body on collateral to take care of the body. So it's forbidden in Judaism to do things that are dangerous. So can I go bungee jumping in Judaism, right? These are dangerous sports. It's questionable if you're allowed to do such things. In America, it's your life. You can do whatever you want. So what if you die? So putting on a seatbelt, right? According to the statistics, it's not just my, I know in the state of Florida, lately, you didn't even have to put a seatbelt on. When I moved down here, no seatbelt. People still don't wear helmets when they drive their motorcycles. I think that's crazy. But it's all about how much can government dictate your life, right? Mask. Okay, we're not going to go into that today. But that's it. In Judaism, the question is not what is my right, but what is my obligation over my life. And I also have an obligation of somebody else's life. And so doctor has an obligation. Well, doctor take an oath, but they have, where they take, a doctor is different than a regular person who has an obligation to save somebody else's life. All right, so that kind of puts together the idea of God being the healer and us having an obligation to seek medical treatment or seek treatments. And I'm not going to discuss what type of treatments. That's a whole nother another discussion. One more thing, and that's a clear source in the Torah, which we're going to read in 2 weeks, in the Torah portion of Mishpatim, where it talks about the laws of injuries. When you injure somebody else, the Torah says, the word is vayerape yerape, and you should heal them. You are obligated, famous line in the Torah, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? Hand for a hand. Here's a classic example that you cannot understand the written Torah without the Talmud, without the oral interpretation. When it says hand for an hand, eye for an eye, which the case is when if somebody knocks somebody's eye out, right? So what is the punishment? So if you don't believe in the oral writing and just in the written writing, it says eye for an eye. You knocked somebody's eye out, then the court is going to take your eye out. That's barbaric. That's not the Jewish interpretation. The Jewish interpretation, oral law explains that you have to compensate the person for their eye. You have to pay. How do you pay for an eye? So there's a whole Talmud section on how to calculate the loss of work, and mainly vayerape yerape, you got to pay the medical bill. And it says the word vayerape yerape twice, and you should heal the healer. And the Torah says, from here we see that God has made the doctors his messengers to heal people. Doctors are messengers of Hashem. God gave them the ability and the license to heal people. And this is really important to understand that the doctors are here to heal people, which will bring us to the next conversation more, not to kill people. And which comes to the end of life questions. Do doctors have the authority to end somebody's life prematurely? But what I'm trying to bring out here is clearly that in Torah law, in halacha, and by the way, when I say halacha, Jewish law governs not only, it's important to understand, not only our religious life, but every aspect of our life. So not only when it comes to religious things, how much matzah you got to eat, and how much shofar you have to listen, how many candles you got to light, but halacha and Torah governs every aspect of our life. So there's no part of our life that is not embedded with Torah's direction and laws and guidance. So that's why when I'm sharing that with you, I say halacha, there's always the question, what does Jewish law dictate in this case? And some of them are obviously easy, and the topic we're going to discuss today are going to be extremely complex. So I'm going to make a disclaimer, number one, that I am by no means an expert on medical ideas. I'm not a doctor, and I know very little about medicine. And I don't, and whatever I say today, do not take that for any advice when it comes to medical things. And even when it comes to, especially when it comes to end of life questions, it is really a case by case. It has to be discussed with experts in the field, in medical field, and also in halachic medical field. And just like you have in medicine, you have, right, family practice, you have a general doctor, and then you have specialists. So also in rabbinic, you have rabbis who are just general rabbis. I consider myself perhaps more like a general rabbi. I try to live up to it. But when it comes to specific questions, there are professional rabbis who are, that's their expertise when it comes to medical decisions or end of life. And I constantly consult with them when those questions come up. Any questions from the crowd so far? Okay, if you have a question, you can raise your hand. And here, any questions so far?
Do not forget that we're going to issue a glossary for people.
Oh, yes, yes. Okay, yes. I will try to do a glossary for words in Hebrew. Yes, I'll make myself a note. So one more thing before I go into some of the medical questions is the power of prayer. The power of prayer and spiritual healing when we're dealing with illnesses. So we're very familiar that there is a prayer called Misheberach. Many times people call or email, come to synagogue, and they want us to do a Misheberach. What is this Misheberach? And apologize for not having any text ready today. And God willing, I'll email that out at the end of the class when I send the recording. Misheberach, the text Misheberach goes as follows. Misheberach Avoseinu Abraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. May he who bless Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our forefathers, our foremothers, Hu Yarapa, may God bless, may God heal, and then we'll utter the name of the person who is ill. So a person who's ill, we will mention the name for a prayer. What name do we use? So ideally, we want to use their Hebrew name. The Hebrew name. Why the Hebrew name? Because we spoke last week, the Hebrew name is connected to your soul. In order to invoke physical healing, we also want to invoke spiritual healing. The physical and spiritual are interconnected. Everything that's in the physical is a result of the spiritual. So just imagine there's this line that you are connected with, that's always connected with above, and it's a line that drips down the energy to your life. So when something is not okay in the physical body, there is a certain blockage perhaps in something that is going on in the spiritual realm. Doesn't mean it's your fault. Just like when somebody gets sick, it's not your fault. It's out of your control. But we assess and we look, there is perhaps something that is spiritually blocking from the blessings to flow. And we need to unblock this spiritual energy. How do we unblock the spiritual energy? So the Rebbe was very strong. The Rebbe would always encourage to focus on certain mitzvot that are connected to our well-being. We know that mitzvot, as I spoke last week, is not just a commandment. Mitzvot is a connection. In Hebrew, tzavta means a connection. When I do a mitzvah, my soul connects with God. But every mitzvah, there are so many mitzvahs connect a certain different aspect in our well-being. So just like you have the full body, which is, when you say, where am I alive in my body? Everywhere. I'm alive in my hand, I'm alive in my leg, I'm alive in my head. But that's the general life force I have. But then there is the individual life that I have in my certain organs and my certain limbs. There's more life, perhaps there's more life in my head than in my in my feet, right? I can, if God forbid something happens to your foot, it doesn't end your life. So every mitzvah is a connection to the source of Hashem. Every mitzvah, no matter what. So every mitzvah is good to do. But there are certain mitzvahs that are more in tune with a certain individual energy that can be connected to a certain body part. So what is one of the most popular or famous mitzvah that is about protection? That is protection that we do before we get sick, and that is a mezuzah, right? When we put a mezuzah, God says in the Torah, you put a mezuzah on your doorpost, it will be as a protection for you. In the Hebrew letters of the mezuzah outside, there's a shin, and there's two more letters, Dalet and Yud, which is one of God's names, Shaddai, which spells out, the three letters spell out the three words, Shomer Dalsot Yisrael, guardian of the homes of the Jewish people. So a mezuzah is a spiritual protection for your home, and a mezuzah needs to be done properly. It's not the case that many people focus on. It's the parchment, it's the actual ink, just like a Torah scroll. If you would take a Torah scroll out of the synagogue and send it to Kinko's and make a copy, does that become a holy Torah? No. Same thing with mezuzah. Do not buy a mezuzah from the gift shop or in the market that is just a paper copy. It's meaningless. It's really meaningless. We want to create the energy, the spiritual energy. So make sure you get a mezuzah that is made out of parchment, but actually a scribe spend a few hours writing every letter, and you place it on your doors of your home. And I'll be happy, as one of my busy occupations, to go to people's homes and to check your mezuzahs, to put them up, to give you the opportunity to have that protection. That's in one example. The other example, other famous, there's like top 10 mitzvot, not the 10 commandments, our top 10 mitzvot, tefillin for men, lighting Shabbos candles for women, mikvah, study of Torah, which is an important mitzvah, Shabbat. These are the 10 campaigns the Rebbe made about mitzvahs, and I have witnessed myself many times where there was literally a kind of a fix in a certain mitzvah that made drastic changes in the physical well-being. But I want to make clear that I'm not saying that if you don't have a mezuzah or you have a fake mezuzah, that God forbid you're going to get sick. God forbid. That's not the way it works. By illustration of the story, in the 70s, there was a terrorist attack in Tzfas, where terrorists took over a school and killed about 27 or 23 children, students, and it was a dormitory of like 150 rooms, and 23 or whatever, 20 out of the 150 died. And the Rebbe, they asked the Rebbe for direction. The Rebbe instructed they should go check the mezuzot of the school. Every door in Israel, you go in Israel, everywhere there's always mezuzot, right? Liz, correct? Army bases, everywhere there's mezuzah. You go to the government building, every mezuzah. You come into Ben Gurion Airport, may be open speedily. It's the largest mezuzah in the world, I believe, one of the largest mezuzah. When you go down that ramp before the passport control. So they went and checked all the mezuzot, because even if the mezuzot are, if they're handwritten on parchment, after a few years, letters can crack or letters can fade, and then it becomes no longer valid. It's not kosher. If you have a Torah scroll and one letter is missing, right? You have 300,000 letters in the Torah, and one letter is missing, or one letter is cracked. It's not that the Torah is 99% kosher. It is 100% not kosher anymore. You can fix it. It's not hard to fix it, but you always have to check, especially because handwritten, to check. And that's why even if you have a mezuzah, it's important, especially if something's going on in your life, to check the mezuzah. I'll just finish the story because I'm getting off topic. They checked, and they found that the exact amount of students that were killed were the amount of mezuzot that were not kosher. And they asked the Rebbe, that's horrible. Does that mean the mezuzot killed those innocent children? And the Rebbe said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We don't understand God's ways. We don't. God's ways are mysterious, and we have no idea why things happen. However, you have to look at the mezuzah like a helmet. A soldier who walks with a helmet in war, right? And if he takes off the helmet, he doesn't die. But if a missile is thrown at him and he doesn't have a helmet, the helmet will protect him. So it's not that the mezuzah, God forbid, will kill you, but we want to increase all the protections we can get, and to make sure that we can flow that energy. And that goes back to prayer. That's why prayer is so important. And we want to connect the name of the person, their soul name, the Hebrew name, and ideally to mention their Hebrew name and their mother's Hebrew name. So when we do a Misheberach, try to submit it with your Hebrew name or the Hebrew person's Hebrew name and their mother's Hebrew name. If you don't know it or you don't have one, you can use, we say, son of Abraham or son or daughter of Sarah, because we are all descendants of Abraham and Sarah. If they're not Jewish, we say daughter of Eve, Adam and Eve. Or if you don't have a Jewish name and you're Jewish, I would encourage that person to get a Jewish name, because that in itself, having a Hebrew name is a blessing for your soul, and that can be done remotely. The person doesn't have to be in the synagogue. It can be done at the Torah reading. It's fairly simple to do so. Which also, many times when a person is really ill, they will sometimes we add a name we add a Hebrew name to their name, and many times it will be a name like Chaim or Chaya, which means life. One second. You there? Oh, okay. No, go ahead. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you, Marvin. Yeah, I will pray for you. Thank you for taking care of the weeds at Chabad. It's a big mitzvah. Perfect timing, right? We have sometimes certain spiritual weeds we need to unplug, so as well. So the point is, the Hebrew name is added many times when a person is very ill, to bring extra spiritual energy. Raphael, which means healing, Chaim, that should be in consultation with the rabbi. Moving on to, so the last thing about prayer. We don't look at prayer. This is important. We don't look at the prayer as that prayer is kind of nice to have. There's the I have to take treatment. I have to do the medical treatment, and prayer is like an added something spiritual that I want to just have an added blessing to what I'm doing. But very much we look that prayer in itself is a healing process. It's part of the healing process, and trying to combine them together is really really important. And you don't have to be religious to get prayer or to pray yourself, and you don't have to be a believer. Even if you have somebody that might not be a believer or doesn't believe in you or believe in the same, it is perfectly fine to pray for them. All right, on the next part. Wow. So, in regards to obligation of seeking medical attention, some background noise. Hold on a second. Come on in. Are you coming for the class? Okay, take a seat. The challah pickup after class, or go inside. They'll help you with the. Okay, go ahead. the advantage of having the class in the parking lot in Chabad, right? Huh? The advantage, quote unquote. Okay, we talked about the obligation to treat everyone, which means in the sense that we are obligated to even treat a person even against their will at times. And first, I'm going to address, before I get to the end of life, I want to address organ donation, because that kind of will tie in together. So what's the deal with organ donation in Torah law and in halacha? What's fascinating, by the way, is Israel is a democratic state, but it's a Jewish democratic state. Correct, Liz? It's more Jewish or less democratic? They can't figure it out. They had to force election. So they have been very much at the forefront to deal with the with medical and technology, to blend it together with Torah and halacha. So the Israeli government works together with a group of doctors and professors or professionals because the society in Israel is so diverse. They want to make sure that they have a system that works, that will please the more observant and even the least observant. So there's some type of so there's a lot to read and a lot of information that comes out of Israel, and everything in medicine. It's what whatever you read today is tomorrow is going to be a lot more advanced, because the research and the advancements are so great. So when it comes to organ donation, so we spoke last week that the most important mitzvah is to preserve life, right? In Torah it says you should live by the Torah, the chai bahem, which we interpret not to die by the Torah. There's no religious observance that is permitted to be done on the cost of life, with exception of three things in Judaism. So in other words, any mitzvah is suspended when it comes to life and death, with exception of three things. Number one is murder. In other words, if somebody forces you to kill somebody else, or they will kill you, you're not allowed to kill somebody else. The other one is worshiping idols, idol worship. In other words, somebody force you to worship idols or to be killed, you have to let you be killed. And the third one is violating another woman. So violating another woman, you're not allowed to do, even if it means to be killed. So those are the three things. But anything else, for example, Shabbos, right? So, or kosher. If your life can only be saved by eating non-kosher, then you have a mitzvah to eat non-kosher. If on Yom Kippur, which is an obligation to fast, and fasting will kill you, then you have a mitzvah to eat on Yom Kippur. And I say the word mitzvah, not just you are permitted, but you're obligated. Again, you are not in control. I have sometimes people who do certain things without knowledge, and it hurts them. And it hurts them physically because they are stubborn about a certain ritual that they have to do. So that is very important to remember. Now, not only are the laws suspended to live, but I also have to have an obligation to save somebody else's life, as I spoke earlier. So when it comes to organ donation, the flip side is that I'm never allowed to kill somebody to save somebody else's life. I'm never allowed to kill somebody. I'm not allowed to shorten a person's life in order to save another person's life, which puts the whole organ donation in a very complex situation. So number one, when it comes to the donations that are the live donations, like a kidney, for example, right, or bone marrow or blood donations, those things don't harm you. They don't harm you. That is a mitzvah to do. It is a mitzvah to give a kidney to somebody else. As long as you are healthy enough, it's not gonna hurt you. And there's a question, a risk factor, because everything there's risk, right? Even if I give away a kidney, there's risk for that. But if you want to do it and you are a candidate to do it, it is one of the greatest mitzvah to save another person's life. As the saying goes, whoever saves one life saves the entire world, right? So that is definitely permitted. The question is organs that come from a deceased person. So if they're deceased and they're available, then absolutely we're allowed to use those to save somebody else's life. The complex is that many times there are situations where in order to harvest an organ, the doctors need to end that life, even for a moment shorter, in order to save somebody's life. And that is a very complex question that is not so simple. Because sanctity of life in Judaism is every moment, and I forgot to emphasize that earlier, that life is not defined by the quality of life. If you look at life that I am in charge of my own life, and I can make my own decisions, and God has nothing to do with it, and I don't believe in the soul, and I don't believe in that the body was gifted to me, then it's a matter of quality of life. I can decide when I want to live, and I can decide when I stop my life. I don't want to suffer, and I want the doctor to shorten my life. But in Judaism, we look at life, the sanctity of life, that no matter what, there is a purpose and a mission every moment the person's on this earth, and only God can take a life, nobody else. And I already know what your questions are going to be. So, but there's many sensitive and delicate situations, right? Which we'll discuss soon, about prolonging life, treatments, terminal illness, ventilator, taking them off the ventilator, and stuff like that. But from the foundational aspect, we need to look at life at the sanctity of life. And even if even if a person who there's no quality of life, it doesn't change the decision to end a life. In other words, life is not about, is there quality of life or is there no quality of life? There is a purpose and mission for every life in this world. The issue of harvesting an organ or taking an organ from a deceased person, you hear sometimes that this is a big no, because in Judaism we believe that you're not allowed to touch a body. You're not allowed to do an autopsy on the body. Why not? Because a body is sacred. In Judaism, a body that dies is not called a corpse, it's still called a person. And we need to bury the person the way they died. We're not allowed to take anything out. Even when you see these horrible images of a terrorist attack, a bombing attack in Israel, in the buses back in the 90s, early 2000, you would see a group called Zaka, Organization Israel Zaka. They come in white suits, and they go and they collect every little piece from human remains. That is so important. Why? Because every human remain needs to be buried, ideally with the person. And we're going to discuss Tahara. Not long ago, I did a Tahara where there was some bleeding. I don't want to go graphic, but we had to stop the bleeding and then take all the bandages and towels that we used and put it in the coffin, because even the blood has life. Blood has some spiritual life to it that we need to bury with it. So how can I take an organ from somebody who died? But if somebody who died, so here we invoke the idea that to save a life is a mitzvah. So you're allowed to take an organ from somebody who's already dead to save somebody's life, but you're not allowed to kill somebody actively to save somebody else's life. If I already brought up autopsy quick, in general, autopsy is forbidden in Judaism. There are exceptions in a criminal case that has to be dealt with, again, on a case by case with supervision. But many times when the medical examiner wants to do an autopsy, it can be avoided by simple stating our religious beliefs. So we have a very good relationship here with our medical examiner here in Sarasota County, and he understands. And what is a family, when sometimes the police or something, they want to have an autopsy done, something they can just do x-rays without touching the body, and it's sufficient for them to figure out cause of death, or sometimes it's just more for just paperwork that they have to do, and there's a law, and there's every state is different, but in Florida there is exceptions. So when, God forbid, you deal with somebody who has to deal with this, you don't want to unnecessarily have to do an autopsy to somebody. It's very painful for the person, for the soul, and it should be addressed. Okay. Wow, time flies. So let's talk not quickly, let's talk a little bit about end of life, and then we'll take questions.
Rabbi, quick question about autopsy.
Yeah.
Can you do it if there's a reason to think that there might be something that the children may have inherited, or that would save their lives if they could look at the parent and see what killed them, a situation like that would save a life? Would that be a kosher autopsy? Maybe.
I don't know. I would ask an expert, and also probably depend what it is that we're looking for. I had a situation where there was where people want to donate their bodies for research, right? Many universities want to get bodies, so unclaimed bodies, and they use them for research. So it was a family that was insisting that they want to take the body, instead of burying it, to give it to the University of Florida. And when I explained how it goes against Jewish tradition, I actually called up somebody at the university and I asked them, well, if we don't bring that body, will it affect lives? And they said, no, absolutely not. We have thousands of bodies. We don't need this particular body. So sometimes a good intention, you want to put it in the bigger perspective. But again, in cases like this, it goes back to really a case-by-case situation, what specific the need is. Somebody in the family has something a real illness, but that this can really potentially save. I would say there's probably leniency to that. And also the question, how invasive are we doing? What's the, how invasive are. All right, any other questions on this? Okay. End of life. So in general, we have an obligation to treat illnesses. Questions about terminal illnesses. Do we have an obligation to treat them when there is no hope, and the treatment is more to prolong a life? So there's a difference of treating an illness or prolonging a terminal illness. So the general rules are that you have an obligation to give the very basic, which is oxygen, food, and those infections that causes pain to a terminal ill person, but you do not have an obligation to actively prolong somebody's suffering with experimental treatments or treatments that are just going to make the suffering longer. The problems gets when you started something to stop in middle. That's where it gets complicated. For example, do we have an obligation to put somebody on a ventilator, on a breathing machine? It's generally you have an obligation, but sometimes you don't. And then if you did it, the bigger problem is taking off somebody. So because we are not allowed to actively take somebody off the machines and let him die. Doctors generally see life differently than we see it in Judaism, and they will talk to a family and explain to a family, and there's no quality of life. The person will, it's a matter of days, so why wait around? We need the beds in the ICU. There's all these examples. So let's just pull the plug. It is something that should not be done, and the family should know that. Super important. I'm going to email that, God willing, is to have a living will, and specifically to have a halachic living will.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I want to just, since you brought up the living will, I wanted to mention that here in Israel, they don't honor a living will. If you hear in America, they'll say, I have a DNR, do not resuscitate. And in Israel, there is no such thing. They will not, if the family says that we have a DNR, we brought it from the States, the doctors here say, no, it's up to a doctor to decide if someone will be resuscitated, not the person, not the family.
So that's interesting. I am actually started to listen to an American ICU doctor who was doing some residency in Israel to help the Israeli government to come together with these issues that they're having about living will and the DNI. Which I understand though is that there are certain maybe not this specific case, but there are certain is a certain living will in Israel. Maybe it's being done now, or it's in the process, that those go into a national database. In other words, here, if somebody comes into the hospital and you don't know who the family is or what and what the wishes are, and the family doesn't even know, then it doesn't help much. But in Israel, I believe what they're working on, that everybody's wishes that they allow to give people, room to make decisions goes into a national database, that if you come to a hospital, they can pull it up in the computer. But something that I will try to find out what works in Israel. But I'll send there's a group of Jewish lawyers who put out on the internet halachic living wills for every state, because every state has different laws. And there you can state that those decisions, medical decisions, should be done, by whoever you appoint, but in consultation with the rabbi, who that the family knows that the rabbi should be consulted in those questions, in those decisions. So if that's something I encourage you to do, and something that is important to you, I encourage you to download the form and fill it out, do it, and then legalize it. So that's taken care of. As well as we're going to talk our burial wishes, which is super important, especially in America, as I said earlier in class. I'm dealing now with a clear case where this elderly person told me clearly she wanted to be buried. We actually went out to the cemetery, but she never finished it. She never wrote it down. And now her family doesn't really, doesn't have the same beliefs, perhaps. So you want to avoid those things from happening. So we have an obligation to make people comfortable. They shouldn't suffer. That's important. And most important is to make the person not to be afraid, to be there for them, which is so difficult now under Corona, where so many people are alone. Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, is one of the greatest mitzvot, which Maimonides writes. The objective of Bikur Cholim is to, very simple, be there for the person. He writes that 1,000 years ago, and Maimonides was a great doctor himself. Just to be with a person there helps heal the person. To pray for them, to make sure they have all their physical needs. And which brings me to the idea that we, as much as we say that God is in charge when we die, we don't ignore the fact that death will happen. Meaning, we should prepare ourselves, and we should be allowing, obviously in a sensitive way, to have a person, to give the person the gift of closure. That's important. Sometimes people don't want to talk about it, or don't want to, or afraid how to speak and what to say, which is understandable. But to be prepared, to give them closure, where they can say goodbye, where they can ask for forgiveness, we're going to say the prayers, as we're going to go through them probably next week, is super important. With that, I hope I gave you a little bit of an overview. If there's any questions before we close the class. Yes, Iona. You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Always a question on brain dead versus physically dead, and that sustaining a person, that if they're never going to come out of just breathing but not having any consciousness.
There is a big debate about brain dead, if it's considered dead, and again, brain dead has many stages. So, I remember learning years ago studies of there's still this, what they have explored, that there's no more life in any of the cells or whatever. I don't know what the words are. That with advanced technology, that they did find that there is certain activities in the brain, even what they deemed before brain dead. So these are difficult questions, and again, we'll have to address on a case by case, and we should never know of them. But it's not clear cut. Oh, brain dead, let's pull the plug. Sometimes, and I believe most halachic authority, and again, when I say halachic authority of today, these are not rabbis who are just making up things. They are rabbis expert in medical fields that will pull together all the analysis of Jewish law that was passed down from generation to generation and apply them in today's. But I do believe that if we can deem a person mostly brain dead, that at that point it is already easier, and I say easier, to permissible to harvest an organ, for example, the heart. I believe there's an interesting case in the Talmud about somebody holding out a knife or sword and somebody running, and they get decapitated, but they continue to run. And then somebody else stabs that person in the heart. Who killed the person? It's like, these are, Talmud likes to play these hypothetical ideas, but back then they didn't maybe had an idea that this can have practical implications of, the guy stopped the heart, the guy stopped the head. These are the interesting. We once gave a 6-week course on medical ethics. So we went through some of those texts from the JLI. It was probably about 10 years ago, maybe one day. Any other questions? Yes, Irene. What do you do if living will contradicts?
But when it's happened, he doesn't have somebody has to decide it.
Mm.
Doesn't matter what is written. So, and another person.
That's a legal question more.
It's, yeah, but another person has
Yeah.
no Jewish beliefs, for example, and wants it wouldn't kill the next person to live, even if he encephalograms negative and all this stuff. So, what has, from Jewish point of view, who has a problem?
So she's asking if a person's put down in writing one belief, and then there's a power of attorney who decides makes the decisions, but their belief is different than the person. What do we dictate to do? Well, I don't know legally what the deal is.
Very issue,
It's a
very-
great issue.
but from Jewish point of view,
Again, I think it will depend on what it is, because in a sense, like if you see somebody that wants to hurt themselves, right, you have an obligation to stop them. So if their written wishes is something that that literally hurts them or goes or shorten their life, then perhaps, and you're in the position to stop it, that you might have the obligation to do it. That when it comes to, we'll talk about burial and cremation, which many times say, well, that was the wish of my mother, she wanted to be cremated, and I believe in burial, but her wishes was cremation. In Judaism, we believe in the soul, and the soul's wishes will always to follow the spiritual journey, and you executing the wish of the soul, even if in writing she wrote against it, you're not violating her wishes. I'm talking if you have the legal authority to do so, obviously. So that happens a lot, but you can take comfort that it's she's now in heaven, and her soul is actually begging not to be cremated. Perhaps in her when she was alive, she didn't understand, or she wasn't brought up with that, but that was more her body decision, not so much her soul decision. So sometimes, it makes for an interesting conversation, and I deal with a lot of families where children or family members never did the wishes of the parents, right? Couldn't care less about the wishes of the parents, did so many things against the parents. All of a sudden, when they died, oh, we got to honor her wishes, Like, all of a sudden, they became such a tzaddik. So sometimes it's just an excuse, or just like it's, they don't want to, don't want to go through that, which we'll discuss in the coming weeks as well. Any other questions?
I have a comment, Rabbi, that I will share with you at some point if you're interested. 2 years ago, my father, who was very Orthodox, was hit by a car, and he was in a coma for 2 weeks. My brother, who's also very Orthodox, had the authority to make all the decisions. We spent the second of the 2 weeks consulting with rabbis all over the country about how to proceed. It was an amazing story. Many of the questions that you've raised came up. Many of them that you're unaware of came up. So it might be educational to you to hear how we dealt with this, but I don't want to take the time now, but I'd be willing to talk to you offline at some point and share that experience.
I would love to. And thank you for sharing that. And that's another thing, and thanks for bringing that up. It is a time of confusion. No matter your religious observance, or it is always a time of confusion. And doctors in general are very much, there's less of a very personal connection to the patient, especially if it's somebody they don't know. It's not like they're a primary doctor. So to have guidance from a rabbi who also can bring in the medical expertise. For example, I have a mentor when it comes to medical questions, one in Australia actually, and one in Israel. and I'm on WhatsApp. I'm with him, and I can be in the ICU with a family in the waiting room, and we have a question we discuss with the doctor, and I can text them or email them the records, and they can talk to the doctor. And the doctors are fascinated. Well, how does the rabbi know so much of medicine? Well, many of them are themselves doctors. There's a famous hospital in New York, Einstein Medical Center, which is a nice Jewish hospital, and they have many Orthodox doctors there that are very much involved in those. There's an organization now out in New York. It's a national organization called Chaim Aruchim. You can Google it, which means in Hebrew long life. Chaim Aruchim. They have a 24-hour hotline that you can call with questions, medical questions, and life questions, and guide you through those things with the professionals online. So don't hesitate to do that. And what sounds from you, Ronnie, that this was kind of a gift, that you had that in this very challenging times.
It was not a gift. It was not, but yes, it was a gift. It was a gift to have medically aware rabbis to consult with, and that my brother was connected enough that he had access to them. I mean,
well, that's what I meant.
I would not have known who to call.
Right. I didn't mean a gift as a gift what happened to you, God forbid. And my condolences. That must have been a horrible experience.
It was very difficult.
Any other questions? All right, so my homework is to email I will email a link or an attachment that you can download yourself to the Halachic Living Will, and maybe I'll put that website up as well. There is also an organization that does organ donations. I think it's called HOT, Halachic Organ Donation, Halachic Organ Donation, where you can actually print a form or a card, have an organ donation card that will follow Halachic guidelines. So that's another thing you can do. All right, I apologize if there was anything I said that wasn't sensitive. I know many of you have situations, and I apologize if something I said wasn't sensitive. And again, just to be clear, do not take any rulings out of this class. Rather, this is just for information. So we'll meet next week again. February 12th, I believe. We have a guest speaker from Israel, which his expertise is cremation versus burial. Doran Kornblut. He's an American who moved to Israel just like Liz. And he will be on Thursday, I think it's the 12th. You'll see in the emails. He will be part of the series here. All right. Everyone stay safe. Oh, it's February 11th. Stay safe and healthy. And those ladies who are baking challah tonight at the virtual grand challah bake from the Sarasota Manatee, have fun. And if you still want to join, email me. Maybe we could still put you on the list. All the best. Stay safe.
Thank you.